Hey, welcome Grove Online. Thanks for joining us wherever you are tuning in from. We know that many of you are all across the country watching this with us right now. And even beyond that, outside of our country, places like Canada, some of you are in Indonesia, in Malawi, literally all around the world. And we are so humbled and grateful that you are choosing to spend this time in worship with us. So let me tell you just a couple quick reminders of things that are happening here that we'd love for you to be a part of. Our Making Sense of the Bible class is this Sunday, June 27th, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. The Bible is this big book, and it's not just a story, it is the story. And we best understand our own lives and our own story and where it fits in when we understand God's story. So we're looking at the big picture of the Bible, the theme of it, and how do we make sense of this thing. So it's from 4 to 6. It's free. Come on down, be a part of that if you can. Also, next Sunday is July 4th, and we have a barbecue after our services here, as well as some water slides and fun for kids out front. So tell them to bring their bathing suit, and it'll be a fun time here celebrating at the Grove. Come be a part of that. Thank you for what you give to the Grove. What you give allows all of our ministries to be possible, and you can give by texting the words The Grove AZ to 77977, or by just visiting our website, thegroveaz.org, and clicking on the giving page there. So today we are continuing our series in Thrive, and we are looking at how we can thrive in our relationships, and specifically relationships with difficult people. And we all have those people in our lives. You know who that person or those people are in your life. And we are going to get some teaching and instruction, wisdom, and how we can love them better. So grab your Bible and get ready to worship with us today.
You see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadows, your love surrounds me. There is nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. There's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Battle belongs to you. Oh, we praise you. Yeah, we praise you. I stand before you now. The greatness of your renown. I have heard of the majesty and wonder of you, King of heaven, and humility I bow. And as your love and wave after wave crashes over me, crashes over me, for you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. Oh yeah, you made a way for us. Ooh, you made a way for us every day. You're making us stronger. Oh yeah, I have heard you call my name. I have heard the song of love that you sing. Whoa, so I will let you draw me out beyond the shore into your grace. Oh, your grace, and as your love and wave crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way. And that's your love in wave after wave. Crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. Oh yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to our summer worship series. And for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be coming to you on Saturday evenings at 5 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. with this time of worship and teaching from the Grove. And if you've been with us the last month, we started a series we titled Thrive. And it's overcoming life's greatest struggles. There's areas in our lives that we have struggles in. How do we not just survive those things, but how do we thrive through them? And today I want to talk about the idea of relationships that are a challenge. And it's the struggle with difficult people. And my hope today is that by the time we're done, you just don't think that you can survive difficult people, but you can thrive in those relationships. When you think about it, difficult people are everywhere. Let's be honest. They're in your home sometimes. They're in your family. They're in your workplace. They're in your college classroom or your dorm room. They can be people who are hostile, aggressive, even rude, mean, selfish, hurt you with their words and actions. In the animal kingdom, there's an animal like this. You know it well. It's called the skunk. And the skunk is not usually seen as a pet for human homes, right? Because people in their homes, they have things like lizards. People even have boa constrictors. They have pot-bellied pigs, but nobody wants a skunk as a pet. Why? Because there's always the risk that you'll make the thing angry and it will take out its vengeance on you. Skunks can turn on you with this nasty, smelly spray and you'll regret it. When skunks get angry, this is the truth, they dance around and like an angry cat, all right? But then, worse than cats, they have this spray that they'll spray on you. They can spray accurately up to 15 feet, and that smell will last for days, weeks, sometimes even months. So it's hard to get close to a skunk, isn't it? It's hard to hold them and hug them and love them because you never know if they're a safe animal. Unfortunately, there are people like that. Some people, it's hard to get close to because you're always afraid, walking on eggshells, that they're going to turn on you, hurt you with their words and actions. Those kinds of people we'll talk about today as difficult people or even sometimes toxic people. And like I said, this message today is not just how do we survive those relationships, but how do we thrive in those relationships? Because let's be honest, all of us have difficult people in our lives. It could be the coworker who is constantly criticizing your ideas or even stealing your ideas and taking credit. It could be the in-laws who are telling you how to raise your kids. It could be a difficult child who knows how to press your buttons and set you off just with the right words. It could be a friend whose tongue is too sharp and too critical. And maybe you are that difficult person in someone else's life. Maybe you've never thought about yourself that way, but let's be honest today. I think some of the most difficult people, though, the trouble is they are people that we're close to. They are people that we've loved. It could be a relative. It could be a family member. It could be someone you're dating. It could be a parent. But here's the miracle of relationships. And we'll go back to the animal kingdom. Here's the miracle of skunks. Skunks learn to get along with each other. Skunks share habitats together. Skunks even have baby skunks. They've learned how, even when they get irritated with the people, to get along with them, to get close without getting sprayed on, without getting hurt. And I think in our human relationships, we can learn the same thing. I think our human tendency, when there's someone difficult in our life, even toxic, our tendency is to stay away from them, give them a wide breath, and go around them. I had a good friend, close friend, say to me a while ago, he says, Palmer, I figured you out. I said, you figured me out. What is that? He said, you do not have any tolerance for difficult people. And he's right, because who does? And I think he had noticed that I would try to push away people who are difficult in my life. I think there's a better way than that. I think there's a more biblical way. I think there's a way to come close to people, even people that are difficult, to love them as Jesus Christ teaches us to. So difficult, unsafe people, it's not a new thing. They've been around for centuries. So if you have your Bible or your app or follow along on the screen with me, I want to share a story, a true story from the Old Testament in 1 Samuel 25 about a very difficult person. His name is Nabal, and we're going to read about him. It's longer than I normally read with a text, but it's a super engaging story. So stay with me here as I read this. There was a certain man in Ma'an. He was prosperous. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. The man's name was Nabal, which means fool, a Calebite, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and good-looking. The man was brutish and mean. How do you like that? David was out in the backcountry. He was on the run from King Saul. And he heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So he sent 10 of his young men with these instructions. Go to Carmel, approach Nabal, greet him in my name, say peace, life, and peace to you. And don't you love that greeting, by the way? And when your shepherds were camped near us, we didn't take advantage of them. So if we read the text more closely, Nabal's shepherds had camped near King David when he was hiding in the desert or in the wilderness, and they guarded them. I'll keep reading. He says, what I'm asking is that you be generous with my men. Share the feast. Give whatever your heart tells you. David's men went and delivered this message word for word to Nabal. Nabal tore into them. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? The country is full of runaway servants these days. Do you think I'm going to take good bread and wine and meat butchered for my sheep shears and give it to men I've never laid eyes on? Who knows where they've come from? David's men went back and told David what he had said, what Nabal had said, and David said, strap on your swords. It's like, it's on now. This is how David wants to deal with difficult people, okay? It's pretty true how most of us would. Verse 14, one of the young shepherds told Abigail, Nabal's wife, what had happened. Do something quickly, the servant said, because big trouble is ahead of our master and all of us. Nobody can talk to him. He's impossible, a real brute. This is the Message Bible. I love how colorful the language is. Verse 18, Abigail went into action. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep, a bushel of roasted grain, 100 raisin cakes, 200 fig cakes, and 5 nothing bundt cakes. I just thought I should add that. And she said, she had it all loaded on the donkeys. And she said nothing to her husband Nabal. As soon as Abigail saw David, she got off her donkey, fell on her knees at his feet, saying, my master, let me take the blame. Let me speak to you. Listen to what I have to say. Don't dwell on what that brute Nabal has done. He acts out the meaning of his name. Nabal, fool, foolish. Foolishness oozes from him. When God completes all the goodness he has promised for my master David, for you, and sets you up as a prince over Israel, my master David will have the weight in his heart and the guilt of this avenging murder. And David said, blessed be to God. He sent you to meet me, and blessed be your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from this murder. So Abigail convinces David to not kill her husband and anyone else who he was mad at. The story continues. I'll wrap it up quickly. So Abigail goes back home. Nabal, she says, Nabal is having a feast, and he's drunk. So she doesn't want to tell him what. The next morning, she tells him that David was on his way with an army to kill him, and that she rescued his life. We read next, Nabal has a heart attack and dies. And then David comes back and asks her to marry him. It's kind of a beautiful story, but kind of an odd story in the Bible. So Abigail, obviously, for a long season in her life, was dealing with a very difficult person, Nabal, maybe even a toxic person. Maybe you are in that place right now. I have on the screen right now a few signs of maybe you are dealing with a toxic person in your life. I think it's sometimes we all have, and maybe for you it's right now. One, this person is constantly pointing out your flaws, but always bragging about their own success. Because of their narcissism, they rarely affirm you. That's the first sign. Second, they blame you or someone else for all of their problems. 3, they are always right and tell you you are always wrong. Here's another sign of a toxic person in your life. They ignore your boundaries, even though you've made them clear. They have no respect for that. And next one, 5, they are habitually dishonest. Why is that? Because they are constantly trying to manipulate you and people around them in their lives. That's what makes them a difficult, toxic person. Next, they are takers and rarely givers. And finally, they are chronically negative. Their moods are usually down. They're up and down. And they use their moodiness to get your attention. Those are the few signs. Maybe you've been seeing this in a person in your life. You're wondering what's making the relationship so difficult. I think the first step here is to recognize that you have this person in your life. Now, what do you do with them? I think with God's help and grace, we can take the step of not just surviving those relationships, but finding a way to show them love and grace and even thrive in those relationships. That's why we've titled this series, Thrive, how to thrive through life's most difficult struggles. And so today I want to share with you a few practical ways to show love and grace to a difficult person. And I want to start with this idea, and this is on the screen right across the bottom, is I invite you, when you face someone who is difficult, someone who has criticized you, someone who has said something hurtful, it could be a text, an email, it could be in a conversation, it could be in a phone call. I want to invite you first to pause and breathe and take some time before you respond. In James 1, we read this, my dear brothers, this is verse 19, and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Here's the thing, and this is what Abigail is encouraging David in our story in 1 Samuel 25. David, like most of us, is responding to this difficult person with anger and revenge. And Abigail comes in. We read that she is a wise, godly woman. And she says, David, can you just pause and think about this? Take a minute, breathe. There's repercussions. Your reputation's on the line. You're going to be the king of Israel. You don't want this senseless revenge on your hands. How brilliant is that? So James, the brother of Jesus, says, be slow to speak and slow to become angry. I think there's a lot of us that maybe are the difficult person in other people's lives because we are not slow to speak, because we are not slow to respond, because we do not pause before we respond. There's an example of a coach. He's a manager actually in baseball that I remember watching when I was a kid. His name is Billy Martin. And Billy Martin was the infamous and great manager, by the way, of the New York Yankees. And they say, I think he managed for the Yankees 5 different times and then other teams in between, clubs in between, because they said every job that Billy Martin had, he was fired from every one of them. So the Yankees would fire him. When they weren't winning, they'd hire him back. But he was notorious for his temper. He would kick dirt on umpires. He would throw bases, whatever. So they say this is a true story. I'll let you be the judge. Billy Martin is with a friend, and it's in the off season, and his friend is taking him hunting in upstate New York. And his buddy had said, hey, my friend owns a farm there. Let's go by his farm. It's a huge, like 100 acres. There's deer in the woods, and we can go hunting. So they go up there with their guns. And before they go hunting, Billy Martin's friend says, hey, let me run in his house and tell him we're here. So he goes in the house. When he meets his friend who's the farmer and owns this large 100-acre parcel, he says, hey, do me a favor since you're here with your guns. I have a horse that has been a family pet, and he said, but it's time to put it down. It's so old, and I don't have the heart to do it myself, so could you do me a favor and put it down before you go hunting? And Billy Martin's friend says, sure. So he comes back to the truck where Billy Martin is waiting, grabs his gun, and Martin says, what are you doing? He says, my buddy just told me we can't hunt here. So I'm going to go shoot his horse. And so he goes off behind the barn where the horse is tied, and he goes to shoot it, and he shoots. As soon as he does, he hears another shot ring out, and he comes back to the truck, and here comes Billy Martin running. And he said, Billy, what'd you do? He says, I'm mad at him too. I just shot his cow. So supposedly that's a true story. This is why I say pause. Breathe before you respond. King Solomon says this. He has this excellent advice in Proverbs. This is David's son, and he says in Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I invite you to memorize that a soft answer turns away wrath. Use it when a difficult person comes into your space. You'll be surprised how that simple use of de-escalating words calms the situation down. And give yourself permission to not respond. I think we are all more wise when we have time to think about our response, pray about it, sleep on it. There's no one who says you have to give an answer today or in the moment. So pause. That's my first advice here in dealing with difficult people. The second one is this. Create boundaries. Keep them at a safe distance. As we read this story of Abigail, it's clear that Abigail has some boundaries between her and Nabal. Because, for example, she wants to de-escalate this situation with King David. And she knows that she can't even talk to him about it. So there's some things that she's chosen to not talk to him about. Maya Angelou, the famous poet, says this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Wow. So there's some people in your life who need boundaries. Let me say that again, what Maya Angelou says. She says, when someone shows you who they are, when they show you they are difficult, toxic, hurtful people, she says, believe them the first time. And maybe it's time to put up boundaries. Because I think a lot of times we stay in relationships with someone who keeps hurting us, keeps abusing our friendship, keeps abusing our love, keeps abusing you with their words and actions. And you do not have to let that happen in your life, even with people who are close to you. And so one of the most biblical things I think we can do is to establish boundaries and say, no, you can't do that, or here's the grounds for how we'll operate. I think to establish boundaries, you need to be direct and clear about what those boundaries look like. In most of our conversations, when we want to tell someone something that is uncomfortable, psychologists say we only go 90% of the way. We lead the last 10%, hoping they'll fill in the blank. And I would say no. When you need to establish boundaries, be very clear and direct. I've learned that Americans view directness as rudeness. Well, in other places, people just say it out as it is. And I'm not saying you need to be rude by any sense. I'm just saying you need to be clear, not leaving space for them. When you leave gray space in the conversation, it muddies it. And then be ready with consequences, not hurtful consequences, but just clear consequences. For example, maybe you have a sister or a brother-in-law who often ask you to babysit for them at the last minute when you already have plans. And so you've established the boundary. If you want me to babysit, I'm happy to babysit my niece or my nephew, but you have to tell me at least a day ahead and make sure I can clear my schedule. Well, that's the boundary. But what if then the next week they call you and say, hey, I've got to run here. I want to drop them off in 15 minutes. And you say, okay. Then all of a sudden they believe that your boundaries are meaningless. So the consequence is you have to remind them, no, I'm sorry, I need a day's notice. It feels hurtful, but that illustration multiplies itself 1,000 times in our work relationships, in our friendships, in our relationships with our fathers and our mothers, our sons and our daughters. It's not an unkind thing. It's just you have to protect who you are. And do it in love and respect. Here's a third piece of advice that I want to share with you from our story in 1 Samuel, is to learn their story. I think one of the things that we see here is that Abigail, I don't know how she learned David's story, but Nabal says, I don't know who this guy is. I have no idea who this, he calls him a runaway servant. He has no idea, but Abigail is brilliant and wise. So before she goes to meet David, she's learned his story. And she knows that he's about to be the king of Israel. And so when she goes, she tells him, reminds him of his own story. And retelling his own story and his own future, it de-escalates everything. There's something very valuable in knowing the stories of the people who are difficult in your life. Now, here's the hard thing. You are saying to yourself right now, I have no interest in their story. There's such a pain in the neck, I could care less about their story. But when you know their story, you know their pain, you know their past, you know what makes them tick, what makes them behave the way they do. You will understand them better, and your responses, I believe, will be different. I'll share an example from my own life. I was up in up in Sholo, Pine Top, a while ago. It was winter. We were up there snowboarding, and it was early one morning, like 8 a.m., and so I stumbled out to the car and drove down to Starbucks. I needed my fix for the day, and I go into the Starbucks. I'm in vacation mode, I just got on a hoodie and sweatpants and feeling good about the whole morning. And like early 8 in the morning, I come in, and here's a woman at the counter just reading the riot act to this young barista who's making her, it sounds like for the second time, her concoction that she's ordered. Well, the barista makes it, gives it to her. The lady tastes it and flies off the handle and starts insulting her. Well, now, like I'm coming out of vacation mode, like this isn't right, all right? I need to speak up. So I stepped in front of her and I said as nicely as I could, but very clear and direct. I said, I'm sorry. You can't speak to the barista like that. She's doing her best. What you're doing is not right. You're shaming her. And then I said, if you keep talking like this, you're going to have to leave. It wasn't my store, but I thought somebody needed to say that. And so I don't know if that's the right thing to say. Well, 5 seconds later, she starts crying. So now the girl behind the counter, the barista, her eyes are welled up in tears. And now the woman who was angry, she's crying. And she can hardly speak. And I'm like, okay, why are you crying? And then she says, my husband left me this morning. I was like, wow. Now I'm sorry. Now she leaves. She's not happy. The barista's hurt. It was a terrible morning on vacation. But you know what? I didn't know her story. And maybe you have coworkers like that. Maybe you have a roommate in your dorm at college like that, or maybe someone on your floor. Maybe you have a friend in your apartment complex like that, or a neighbor in your neighborhood. You don't know why they are so short or why they won't come close to you. I invite you to get to know their story. We're often quick to judge and quick to write people off instead of pausing to understand or taking the time, like Abigail does, to learn David's story. I want to encourage you to try to establish common ground with whoever this difficult person is. You'll be amazed that when you have a common ground with someone else, that all of a sudden that diffuses that tension that's been in the relationship. You'll find common ground over places you love to travel to, hobbies that you have. It could even be sports. It could be, for example, over the Phoenix Suns, who had an amazing win again last night. By the way, Suns in 4. Suns in 4. I just need everybody to know that, Suns in 4. All right, here's the final piece of advice I want to share with you from this story is to show the person, the difficult person, in your life, grace and peace. And you're again saying, that's too hard. Because in our heart, we want revenge like David. We want to get back. But find ways to show them the grace and peace of Jesus Christ. When you show grace and peace to a toxic person, Christ shines through your life. It will be maybe the hardest thing that you do. And I'm not saying get walked on, let someone walk on you in the name of grace. No. But you can still find ways to show them grace and peace. I challenge you to show them grace and peace by blessing them and championing them, praising them in front of others. And you're saying again, I can't do that. But it's so biblical and it's so good. I love in our story here in 1 Samuel 25, how Abigail, she knows how difficult Nabal is, but she's pleading his case. She becomes his advocate. Can you become the advocate of the most difficult person in your life? Maybe Christ will shine brightest then. Let me read to you what Paul writes about our character in this as you grow the character of Christ in you. This is Colossians 3:12. As God's people who are chosen, holy, and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive them. Forgive as Christ has forgiven you. I think we can be that person of grace and peace like Scripture calls us to, with even the most difficult people in our lives. And so what if instead of like David wants to do, what if instead of retaliating, you begin to bless that person? It changes everything. It becomes the most powerful thing you do. And like I said, practice promoting them. Practice praising them in front of others. Maybe even write them a note of appreciation. Maybe buy them a book that has had an effect on your life and give it to them as a gift to read. Maybe the book is titled, How to Deal with Difficult People. Maybe that's the book. I don't know. But it could be your favorite summer read and give that to them. I love how Paul, the Apostle Paul, opens practically every letter that he writes with these words: grace and peace to you. As we close today, I want to invite you to make those words your mantra with difficult people. Grace and peace to you. Grace and peace to you. You give them nothing to push back against, only grace and peace to you. And so today I end with this challenge for you to live this simple but difficult Christian imperative to love difficult people. Keep living out grace and peace to you. Keep speaking those words in your heart so you can live those words, grace and peace to you. Thank you for joining us, all of you, online everywhere, for our summer worship series. May God fill your home and your life and your workplace and your family and your children and grandchildren's lives with his grace and peace. God bless you all.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for worship today. If you would like to talk with someone that's in your life that's a difficult person to love, like Palmer talked about today, and you'd like some help in knowing how you can improve that relationship, one of our counselors here at the Grove would love to talk with you and help you with that. So you can contact them through our website. Also, if you would just like to connect with us in some way, we would love to hear from you. There's a link in the description that you can click on that will take you to a form you can fill out so we can hear from you. Thank you for what you continue to give to the Grove. You can give through our website, thegroveaz.org, or by texting the Grove AZ to 77977. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.